will say that, like a lot of people, I saw the Getty images of the pillow dropping behind the skirt, and I thought at first they could be photoshopped, but Getty images is very reliable.
What if everything we thought we knew about the royal family, about their traditions, their secrets, even their bloodlines, was a carefully managed illusion? What if the most sacred rule of royalty, the one thing the monarchy can never compromise, was now hanging by a thread because of one explosive question? A question that's never dared to be asked until now? The palace, the symbol of power, dignity, and centuries-old legacy, has reportedly made a direct, behind-the-scenes demand that's left even the most seasoned royal watchers stunned: a DNA test on Meghan and Harry's children. That's right. Not for health reasons, not for private medical clarity, but to settle a royal mystery that threatens to shatter the very foundation of the House of Windsor. On the surface, it sounds like a wild internet rumor. But according to well-placed insiders and reports swirling from palace corridors to global headlines, this isn't some baseless conspiracy. This is a quiet but unmistakable power move by a monarchy in crisis, a monarchy that can no longer afford to stay silent. And what triggered this? Years-old photos, unanswered questions, a string of carefully ignored inconsistencies that have finally boiled over. Because in the shadows of royal tradition, one unsettling theory has taken root, and it's gaining traction. Did Meghan Markle fake her pregnancy with Archie? And if so, why? We're not just talking about tabloid gossip here. We're talking about legacy, succession, legitimacy, the three things the British monarchy was built to protect at all costs. And now, with King Charles steering a fragile institution and public trust crumbling, it seems the palace may be done playing polite. But before you rush to judgment or write this off as another scandal in a long list of royal embarrassments, you need to understand how we got here, how a few whispers turned into a full-blown constitutional crisis. Because the road to this DNA demand didn't start yesterday. It began years ago, with a bump that just didn't sit right. Long before any DNA test was whispered about, there were questions. Quiet ones, easily dismissed at first. Whispers, online theories, side comments buried under articles praising Meghan's style, her grace, her modern image. But some people noticed things. Strange things. Things that didn't add up. It started subtly. A baby bump that seemed to grow and shrink from one day to the next. Video clips where Meghan would crouch in heels effortlessly, her stomach seemingly defying gravity. And then there was the now infamous clip, a high-resolution Getty image showing something that sent conspiracy theorists into overdrive, the outline of what looked like a foam cushion or pad shifting awkwardly under her dress. At first, the response was simple. Photoshop. That was the explanation tossed around most. Meghan's defenders chalked it up to poor angles, dress layering, bad lighting. And to be fair, many public figures fall victim to doctored images and wild online narratives. But this wasn't a random tabloid tweet. This was Getty, a platform known for its reliability and editorial standards. And that changed everything, because Getty doesn't manipulate images. They don't publish sloppy fakes. So if that image wasn't altered, what exactly did it show? Still, at the time, the mainstream media kept their distance. Respect for privacy, fear of appearing conspiratorial, and above all, the unspoken rule. You don't question royal pregnancies. But social media had no such filter. Forums lit up. Reddit threads exploded. Side-by-side comparisons started circulating. Meghan's baby bump looking dramatically different from one event to the next. Some noticed she wore oddly loose coats, even in controlled indoor settings. Others pointed out she was unusually active in late pregnancy. High heels, squatting, kneeling, all with perfect posture and ease. And just like that, a growing portion of the public stopped dismissing the whispers. Still, the palace said nothing. The royal press corps looked the other way. The story never made headlines. But the internet, ruthless, tireless, and endlessly curious, never let it go. It was just waiting for a trigger, a moment that would bring those whispers back to the surface. And now, years later, with renewed scrutiny on Meghan and Harry's position in the royal line of succession, the whispers are no longer just background noise. They've become a full-blown demand. For clarity, for transparency, and for something far more serious than a headline. They want proof.
Saying that he's 2 weeks older, and so I thought maybe that would allow time to wean the baby away from a birth mother if a surrogate was used. it would make sense. But instead of lying to the world, why not just say, we want a baby, we're having a baby, and we're using a surrogate.
You'd expect a royal birth, especially one involving the direct line of succession, to be documented down to the last flower arrangement. And historically, that's exactly how it's been done. When Prince William and Princess Kate welcomed their children, everything was accounted for. Public birth announcements, physician statements, hospital photos, confirmed timelines, and official records filed and signed by royal medical teams. But in Meghan's case, there's nothing. No official hospital name confirmed by the palace, no physician statement, no photographic proof of Meghan entering or leaving any recognized maternity facility, no publicly released documentation of a birth certificate aligned with her delivery. Just a quiet announcement, a few staged images, and an overwhelming sense that something, or rather, everything, was missing. At the time, many assumed this was a privacy issue. Meghan and Harry had made it clear they wanted to do things differently. A less traditional birth, far from the flashbulbs and press pens that had surrounded previous royal deliveries. And people respected that. But in hindsight, that choice may have come at a cost, because when you strip away tradition, remove the layers of confirmation, and offer the public nothing but your word, you leave space for doubt. And in the vacuum of transparency, questions flourish. And here's where it gets troubling. Insiders now claim that when palace advisors recently reviewed records related to Meghan's pregnancy with Archie, what they found raised eyebrows, not because of what was in the files, but because of what wasn't. Reportedly, there was no signed confirmation from any royal obstetrician, no attending physician's record, no hospital ID, and perhaps most shockingly, no internal document confirming a delivery ever took place under Meghan's legal name. Not in the UK, not under any known alias. Just a blank space where verification should have been. To be clear, we're not talking about breaking royal protocol. We're talking about what some advisors are now calling a possible breach of royal trust. Because in a family where image is everything, where protocol exists to preserve legitimacy, these gaps are more than oversights. They're red flags. Red flags that, according to sources, are now being taken extremely seriously. Because if the monarchy can't even confirm its own lineage with documentation, what does that say about its future? Transition. But it's not just the missing paperwork that's raising alarm. It's what those absences may be hiding. Let's get one thing straight. Using a surrogate is not a scandal. Thousands of women around the world rely on surrogacy for legitimate, deeply personal reasons. Medical, emotional, or even physical. There is no shame in it. No disgrace. If Meghan and Harry had come forward and said, "We chose this path," the world would have listened. Many would have applauded their honesty, seen it as yet another bold break from outdated royal expectations. But that's not what happened. Instead, the theory, and yes, at this point it remains a theory, that Meghan may have used a surrogate while publicly presenting as pregnant has sparked an entirely different kind of storm. Not because of the decision itself, but because of the alleged deception that came with it. According to multiple insiders, this isn't just speculation anymore. The theory of a staged pregnancy was reportedly discussed in internal palace meetings. Senior advisors revisited old footage, examining timelines, outfit choices, body language. They combed through statements, media releases, and even behind-the-scenes testimony from palace staff at the time. And the pattern they found reportedly fed their worst suspicions. No maternity ward confirmation, no traditional post-birth photo op outside a hospital. Meghan's baby bump visibly shifting in size within the same week, sometimes even the same day. And yes, the infamous video where her bump seemed to fold or shift entirely as she sat down, fueling viral speculation that she was wearing a prosthetic. To the public, this was the stuff of YouTube conspiracy videos. But behind palace doors, it's now being taken with far more weight, because the palace isn't just responsible for its image, it's responsible for maintaining the legitimacy of the line of succession. If there's any truth to these allegations, any at all, then we're no longer dealing with just a PR problem. We're dealing with a constitutional crisis. And here's the part that makes this so dangerous for Meghan and Harry. Had they simply been transparent, had they shared the truth from the start, this entire situation could have been different. Open, human, relatable. A modern couple making a modern choice. But the optics they chose, the curated bump photos, the dramatic baby shower, the secrecy around the birth location, They built a narrative, one of strength, triumph, and rebirth within the monarchy. But if that narrative was knowingly false, then what they built wasn't just misleading, it was manipulation on a global scale. Transition. And that manipulation may be exactly what forced the palace to act, quietly launching a review that would bring everything crashing down. The moment the palace began treating this not as rumor, but as a matter of internal review, everything changed. According to sources close to the royal household, the turning point came when discussions about Archie and Lilibet's roles in the future of the monarchy became unavoidable. As King Charles began outlining his vision for a leaner, scandal-free institution, the focus wasn't just on slimming down royal duties. It was about securing the bloodline, making sure that those in line for titles, land, and influence had an indisputable claim to the throne. And that's when the review began. Quietly, discreetly. No public announcement, no media leaks, at least not at first. Just a small team of royal aides, advisors, and historians combing through timelines, statements, and, most critically, documents related to Meghan's pregnancies. And what they reportedly found, or rather didn't find, raised enough red flags to trigger an extraordinary move. Behind closed doors, senior members of the royal family began privately discussing the nuclear option, a DNA test to confirm the children's biological lineage. Now let that sink in. This isn't the kind of thing the royal family does. It's not their style. For centuries, their scandals were whispered about, never acknowledged. But this wasn't just about family drama anymore. This was about the crown itself. Imagine the risk they're calculating. To even suggest a DNA test is to admit that doubt exists, that the palace, the very heart of tradition and order, suspects it may have been deceived. It's an accusation so serious it could damage the institution no matter what the outcome is. And yet, according to insiders, the push for confirmation didn't come from tabloid pressure or public gossip. It came from within. From people who understand what's at stake if this issue isn't resolved with absolute clarity. Because when it comes to royal succession, guesswork isn't an option. The conversations, reportedly led by senior advisors to the king, were framed not as an attack, but as protection. Protection of legacy, protection of tradition, protection of the monarchy itself. And under that logic, the demand for DNA proof becomes not just a controversial decision, but a necessary one. Transition. But the deeper the palace went, the more they realized this wasn't just about a test. It was about the survival of the crown and what it would cost to preserve it. For King Charles, the decision couldn't be more painful. On one side, his duty, a crown passed down through blood, bound by centuries of tradition and entrusted to him to protect. On the other, his son, Harry, the once beloved prince who walked away from it all, only to now be at the center of a storm that threatens to rip the monarchy in two. Those inside the palace say Charles is torn, that despite everything, the interviews, the fallout, the betrayal, he still holds a deep affection for Harry. But affection isn't enough anymore, because this isn't just a family matter. It's an institutional crisis. The issue now goes beyond Meghan and Harry. It touches every part of the monarchy: succession, inheritance, title legitimacy, and public trust. If Archie and Lilibet are to hold royal titles, or if they're ever to be counted in the line of succession, then their lineage must be above suspicion. That's the unspoken rule that has held the royal system together for centuries. And according to royal insiders, that's why the gloves are now off. Prince William, often the steady, diplomatic face of the family, is said to be livid, furious that the actions, or inactions, of his brother and sister-in-law are dragging the family name through the mud once again. Behind palace gates, he's reportedly expressed deep concern over the damage this scandal is causing, not just to the monarchy's image, but to its very structure. Princess Anne, known for her no-nonsense attitude, has reportedly been even blunter, allegedly calling the entire situation a disgrace and pushing for immediate resolution. She, like many in the family, understands the monarchy can't afford to stall. Not now, not when the world is watching. But perhaps most devastating of all is King Charles himself. Sources say he's heartbroken, that this isn't the reign he imagined, that he never thought he'd be forced to choose between his personal loyalty to his son and the public responsibility of safeguarding the institution he now leads. Because the truth is, if the palace doesn't act, the public perception becomes its own verdict. Silence becomes complicity. Delay becomes deception.
Pull that rubbish at the holidays because people aren't buying it's just, it's so.
And Charles knows one thing with absolute certainty. He can't lose the public. Not in an age of skepticism, not in the era of Netflix documentaries and viral mistrust. The monarchy only survives if the people believe in it. And without clarity, belief fades. Transition? And yet, amid this rising pressure, Meghan and Harry's silence is becoming harder and harder to defend. At first, Meghan and Harry's silence felt intentional, even noble, a quiet stance against media intrusion, a refusal to dignify rumors, a modern couple choosing privacy over spectacle. But as the palace's internal review deepened, that silence began to sound different. Now, it's no longer interpreted as grace. It's seen as calculated avoidance, and every day they don't address the growing controversy, the narrative shifts further out of their control. Because this isn't a typical celebrity scandal where a well-timed interview or PR statement can smooth things over. This is a direct challenge to their children's place within one of the most rigid and scrutinized institutions on the planet. And staying silent as doubts multiply, that choice may already be doing more damage than any denial ever could. Royal insiders reportedly view the couple's continued refusal to respond as a sign of weakness, or worse, guilt. The longer they delay, the more it appears they're afraid of the truth. Or worse, that they've bet everything on a story they can no longer keep straight. Even longtime supporters are beginning to waver. Commentators who once championed the couple's independence are now calling for clarity, not for scandal's sake, but for closure, for the institution, for the public, and for the children at the heart of this storm. And then there's the optics. Every time Meghan appears on camera, laughing, promoting a new brand, or signing new media deals, it clashes with the seriousness of what's being alleged. It's become harder for the public to separate the curated image from the growing list of unanswered questions. The silence no longer feels like protection. It feels like defiance. And while that strategy may have worked in the past, back when they were newly separated from royal duties and still carried the sympathy of their departure, it's now seen as avoidance, stonewalling, a deliberate effort to wait the storm out. But this isn't a storm that passes. It's a test of trust. And when trust evaporates, no amount of Netflix documentaries, book tours, or controlled interviews can bring it back. And if Meghan and Harry are forced to respond, if they agree to the DNA request, what happens next could shake the monarchy at its core. Let's imagine the palace gets what it wants, a DNA test formalized and verified. What happens then? Well, the first possibility is that the results confirm Harry as the biological father of both Archie and Lilibet. On paper, that might settle the issue. The palace could claim resolution, wrap it in a polished statement about clarity, and move on. But would that really fix anything? Because even if the biological link is confirmed, it wouldn't erase the suspicion of deception. The theory that Meghan may have faked parts of her pregnancy or misled the public wouldn't disappear. The damage would already be done. The public doesn't just want DNA, they want honesty. And many feel they haven't received that. In this scenario, the test results could slightly ease the pressure on the children, reestablishing their legitimacy in terms of bloodline. But Meghan and Harry's credibility? That might be beyond repair, especially if it's proven they allowed a false narrative to circulate for years without correction. Now, let's consider the alternative. What if the results don't align? What if there's a discrepancy, even a small one, that suggests something's off? A mismatch, an anomaly, anything that casts doubt on the official story. Then we're no longer talking about a scandal. We're talking about a constitutional crisis. Because now, the line of succession is in question. The legitimacy of titles, inheritance, even diplomatic privileges could be affected. The monarchy, which relies on heritage more than popularity, would be forced to confront a reality it is completely unprepared for. And Meghan and Harry? Their brand, which has thrived on public empathy, could collapse under the weight of what many would view as a calculated betrayal. Their fans might feel misled, their critics would feel vindicated. And the monarchy, already struggling to modernize, would be dragged backward into chaos. Not because of enemies, but because of its own fractured bloodline. Worse still, the children, innocent in all of this, would bear the brunt of the scrutiny. Every photo, every appearance, every future opportunity would be shadowed by doubt. Not because of who they are, but because of what was left unspoken by the adults around them. This is why the palace is pushing so hard, not to embarrass Meghan and Harry, not to win a media war, but because once succession is questioned, nothing else in the monarchy holds weight. And now the clock is ticking. And yet, the palace isn't waiting for permission. Behind closed doors, they're preparing for the final showdown, one that could end with the most painful consequences of all. For a long time, the public gave Meghan and Harry the benefit of the doubt. They were seen as the modernizers, the rebels escaping an outdated system. Their departure from royal duties was framed as a stand for mental health, freedom, love. And for a while, it worked. Book deals, docuseries, standing ovations. But the tide has turned. Because now, as questions grow louder and the couple remains silent, public sentiment is shifting. Online forums once filled with fanfare now read like investigations. Side-by-side comparisons of Meghan's bump. Clips slowed down to microseconds, pointing out folds, shifts, and inconsistencies. Memes have turned from supportive to sarcastic, and even mainstream media outlets, once hesitant to touch the topic, are starting to ask questions. People feel betrayed, not necessarily because of what Meghan and Harry may or may not have done, but because of what they didn't do. They didn't clarify. They didn't correct the record. They didn't respect the public enough to address a growing mountain of speculation that, in their silence, has turned into fire. And that fire is no longer just burning online. Inside the palace, there are reports that aides and senior royals are furious, not just about the damage being done, but about how avoidable it all could have been. That, with a single statement, a photo, a gesture of transparency, this never would have exploded. But now, it's too late for subtle fixes. Because this isn't just a narrative failure, it's a breach of trust. And in the monarchy, trust is everything. The public has endured royal divorces, affairs, financial scandals. But deception around lineage, around children, that hits differently. That feels permanent, deep, unforgivable. And it doesn't just affect Meghan and Harry, it poisons everything. The crown, the institution, the future. It forces people to wonder, if something this foundational could be faked, what else is smoke and mirrors? And now, after years of silence, after building an empire on selective storytelling, the couple is facing the one truth they can't spin. A truth that could decide their fate forever. One swab. That's all it would take to answer the question that's now threatening to unravel everything, from personal reputations to centuries-old royal bloodlines. A single DNA test that could either restore a measure of trust or confirm the palace's worst fears. For Meghan and Harry, this is the crossroads. If they comply and the results confirm their story, they might win back a fragment of credibility, not all, but enough to calm the institution, enough to silence the loudest critics, and most importantly, enough to protect their children's future in the royal fold. But if they refuse, if they continue to stay silent, that silence will echo louder than any answer. Because at this point, avoidance doesn't look like grace. It looks like guilt. And if the results contradict their claims, even slightly, then the monarchy will be faced with a crisis it has no precedent for, a constitutional mess entangled in scandal, media, and the emotional wreckage of a family already hanging by a thread. Behind closed doors, King Charles is said to be devastated, torn between protecting the institution and holding on to the last shred of connection with his youngest son. Prince William is reportedly furious, Princess Anne disgusted. The palace, once known for its stoicism, is now bracing for impact. Because this isn't just a scandal, this is identity warfare, played out under the harshest spotlight on earth. And perhaps the most tragic part? It didn't have to be this way. Had Meghan and Harry been honest, if their story had been one of transparency, strength, or even medical struggle, the world likely would have stood by them. But by building a fairy tale that may have been scripted for public sympathy, they invited the very scrutiny they hoped to avoid. Now, the royal institution has drawn its line. No DNA, no titles, no proof, no place, no trust, no future. The message is clear. This isn't about feelings anymore. It's about legacy. And as the world waits to see what Meghan and Harry do next, one thing is certain. Whether they submit to the test, deny it outright, or attempt to reframe the story again, it will define them. not as rebels, not as victims, but as the architects of their own royal downfall.